What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're talking transfer tips ahead of Game Week 19. So some of the players that are being brought, some of the players that people are thinking about selling, are mistakes being made. I'm going to give you my opinion. We do now know that the Premier League is going to try and keep going through with the fixtures where they can. So there's going to be no postponement of Game Week 20. So we just need to keep planning for Game Week 19, 20, 21 as normal. There could still be games called off, so you should definitely make your transfers as late as you possibly can. But ultimately, things are going ahead as normal where they can, right? There is some talk now about possible double game weeks in Game Week 22. I'm going to cover that kind of tomorrow in my team selection video, but mostly in the Game Week preview on Thursday. Because there's a lot of time until the next deadline, there's no real rush to do it, and there's nothing official anyway, but I'm going to talk through the latest. We will do that on Thursday. Lots to talk about this week. Today is transfer tips. Hit that like button if you enjoy it. Hit that subscribe button if you're new, and let's jump into it. So I would say this week's a little bit tricky for some of the picks in this video because you don't really want to get rid of them, but you kind of know you should do. And that probably is the same with Bernardo Silva. And obviously we have got a run of fixtures where the deadlines are on Boxing Day 26th, then there again the deadline is the 28th. And then there's another deadline on the 1st of January. So over kind of like 5-6 days, there's 3 deadlines. And obviously not every single player is going to play every single game. So even if Bernardo Silva doesn't play against Leicester at home, he might well play against Brentford away. So as long as he gets one of those 2 games, there could be points in it. And it's not to say that the player you bring in will get both those games either, right? It's difficult to say. I mean, someone like Rafinha, for example, would probably get both games over a quick turnaround. But a lot of players not necessarily in the same situation. So I guess the question is, 48,000 people have got rid of Bernardo Silva. It was over 100,000 last week. And obviously he did blank again. Should you be getting rid of him? I think this is all, again, like I know this is like such an easy cop-out, but it's going to depend on what other fires you got to put out in your team first. Obviously there was quite a few blanks last week, so people may have made transfers they wouldn't usually make. They might have to deal with them. If you've got the luxury where nothing else in your team really needs sorting out, then you could take him out. I will say that with all the uncertainty around matches, possible double game weeks and stuff like that coming up, it wouldn't be the worst week to roll your transfer. But don't let the fact that a lot of people are going to tell you that rolling the transfer is great means that you shouldn't make a transfer. If your team needs it, your team needs it. Simple as that. So I think if you've got the luxury of doing nothing else, you could move him on. I do think with De Bruyne back, that does kind of hurt Bernardo Silva a little bit. I think if one of those two is going to get forward, it's almost always going to be Kevin De Bruyne. But that's not to say that they can't interchange and both go forward as well, right? They've got Rodri behind. They're not a team that's afraid to throw players forward anyway. And we should remember that just a couple of game weeks ago when they played Leeds, yes, when I watched the game in that first half, a lot of it felt like Bernardo Silva was a bit deeper, but he also missed a sitter from 6-8 yards out that another day he puts away, and then he's got 1 goal in the last 2 games from just 1.5 games. So I don't think he's like this really awful pick. I mean, if you look at his kind of price point, 7.6 million, I've said this a lot over the last few weeks, there are Man City midfielders with better underlying numbers, better expected goals, better expected assists. Bernardo Silva's numbers, they're not amazing, they're not awful either, but compared to other Man City midfielders, they are not as good. And one of the things he had was minutes. I just think now, Gundogan's now not started the last 2 games. Is he going to come in at some point? And if he does, will it be De Bruyne that misses out or Bernardo Silva? We've got all this uncertainty for a player that I don't think is going to keep up the amount of scoring that he did recently. So he's a luxury transfer. If you can keep hold of him, if you've got other stuff to do, I don't think that's a big issue. You probably keep him for the next 2 game weeks and then move him on. If you've got the luxury to move him on, it might not be the worst week to do it. But if he starts again, who knows? He could get something. But I just think there are better options in his own team, let alone elsewhere. Smith Rowe is just becoming my arch nemesis for this season, right? A long time ago now, it feels like I bought Saka. He was about 1 million more, but I thought it was worth it because he's nailed on and Smith Rowe isn't. Then Smith Rowe starts loads of games, and then even when he's out of the team, he keeps coming on and scoring. So he's been massively frustrating, but I'm going to try and talk about him objectively, right? One of the reasons I actually went for Saka was not just because he's nailed on, but also his underlying stats are better. He just hasn't converted into FPL points, and sometimes that will happen, right? You've just got to try and get lucky just like anyone else. It just hasn't happened with Saka recently. But he has had 48,000 transfers in. He's actually had quite a similar amount out as well. So people are starting to get rid. The one thing to say is he probably has overperformed this season. And it's not to say there aren't other players that have also overperformed, but his underlying stats, his expected goals, expected assists are pretty low. And these numbers can change, but the thing with him is these numbers are very similar to last year. He's gone up a bit in goal threat, but down a bit in expected assists. So overall, I just don't think he's that great of an option. I think back when you could buy him for like 5.3 million, it was pretty decent. But now he's getting to the prices of other players like Saka, like Rafinha and players like that. I do feel like they are probably stronger options going forward, especially when they're nailed for 90 minutes. To put it into perspective, right, Smith Rowe has scored 7 goals so far this season from 2.7 expected goals, right? Even elite players like Son, Salah, Messi, etc., they don't usually overperform to that kind of standard, right? So at some point, that his returns are going to slow down unless he starts taking more shots, more quality shots and stuff like that. His returns will slow down. But as always, right, I'm not saying that expected goals is perfect. Just because the numbers don't look good doesn't mean that he doesn't score 5 in the next 5, right? Even if he comes off the bench, it could happen, but we're trying to predict. And my prediction would be at some point very soon, his numbers are going to slow down, especially when he's not even first choice and he's not even starting. So the question then comes down to, of course, do you bring him in? I don't think you do right now. I think you've got to go for another midfielder. You either take the risk that Martinelli's definitely going to keep his place, or you spend a little bit extra and get Saka. To me, they're the only two Arsenal midfielders that you should be looking at right now. But if you own Smith Rowe, should you sell him? That's a lot trickier because Norwich away, even if he doesn't start, you know he's pretty much going to come on because he has done the last couple of games. There's no real reason why he wouldn't again. And obviously Norwich away is a pretty good fixture, so you'd be hopeful of another return. So I can see why people would want to keep him. I can also see that if you bought him for like 5.2, 5.3 million, whatever was the cheapest price he went to, you might be more willing to keep him as well for a little bit longer in the hope that he wins his place back. But I just think I said this yesterday when I was talking about Martinelli. Smith Rowe only missed 1 game. It's not like he had a massive long-term injury and he came back and was on the bench. The next 2 games he was also on the bench. The difference was that he came on. I just don't see this as Arteta bedding him back in slowly or integrating him back in slowly. But because of how quickly things changed around, where he lost his place, Martinelli came in, etc., Odegaard as well, obviously, and Lacazette for Aubameyang, it doesn't mean the same thing can't happen, that one of them comes out for a little while and then Smith Rowe has a run. So if I had him, and again, in a week where I'd really like to roll the transfer, a week where maybe I've got other fires to put out, you'd possibly keep him because it's Norwich. But if he doesn't start again, I just don't think that fixture run's even that good for a player that's not... It's not good for a player anyway, let alone a player that's not starting. I guess the only thing to counteract all my arguments I've just said is Gameweek 19, 20 and 21 are very quick turnarounds again. So if he doesn't start Norwich, there is a chance that he starts Wolves, but it's not even that great of a fixture. So if you've got the luxury, you could move him on. But I think because it's Norwich, you maybe give him 1 more week just to see what happens. But I think soon, especially if you got him recently, more around the £6 million mark, it's probably start time to looking to get rid. All right, so I completely get why people are excited about Tsimikas, right? If you can get a 3.7 million defender, not just a defender, but a fairly attacking one for Liverpool, Chelsea, Man City, happy days. I mean, to be honest, if you can get a 3.7 million attacking defender in any team that's going to play regularly, happy days. The problem is Tsimikas is not going to play regularly. He's going to get 2 games. He's going to get Leeds at home and Leicester away, and then Robertson is back. Now, Robertson's suspension, I think, is 3 games, but because of a Carabao Cup fixture, he'll serve one of the games suspended in that one. And so he only misses 2 of the Premier League games. So if you check on the FPL website, he's back on 2nd of January, which is game week 21, Chelsea away. He's definitely getting straight back in, especially when he's had a rest, right? At a time when a lot of players are going to play a lot of minutes, he's actually getting a rest over Christmas. And he's going to be back fresh for that Chelsea away game. So even if Tsimikas was great for the next 2, I just don't see Robertson not getting back in. The problem is as well, obviously, again, 3.7 million playing defenders are like absolute gold dust in FPL because it gives you a lot of budget to spend elsewhere. But it also locks a Liverpool spot for you. Now, you might think, well, soon we're probably going to get rid of Salah for African Cup of Nations, but it's just not worth the transfer in and then back out for me. Look, if Robertson, not that we wish it on anyone, of course, but if Robertson was out long term, let's say he was out for 2 to 3 months or something like that, then I would probably get rid of Jota to get Tsimikas in. Like, he'd be that good value, and then I'd spend that money elsewhere on a different player from a different team, right? And I'd probably have Salah, obviously, if he's available, Trent and Tsimikas, right? It would just be ridiculous value for Liverpool. but he's not out for that long. It's 2 fixtures. For me, it's just not worth it. If you bring him in, you're not... Either you're doing 2 things. Either you're bringing him in and then taking him straight back out 2 game weeks later. In my opinion, that's not worth it. Or you're bringing him in and you're just going to keep him, which is locking you out of a 3rd Liverpool spot. And Liverpool are one of the best teams for FPL because not only are they brilliant, like Man City, but they also don't rotate as often as well. So with African Cup of Nations happening, I think Jota is still a pretty good pick. Firmino hasn't started a game since he's been back. That could happen against Leeds, possibly. But Jota keeps scoring. Klopp said he's got the killer instinct. He might start again against Leeds. We just don't know that for sure. And Trent, obviously, even if Tsimikas was a long-term option, I still think you want Trent. So for me, this is not... I don't think it's a good buy at all. I think it's at a time when there's lots of uncertainty over matches. We could get double game week soon. Transfers are precious. I just don't think it's worth getting Tsimikas in and out. A bit of a cult hero at the start of the season. If Robertson was out long-term, I'd be all over it. But for 2 games, it's just not worth it for me. So a few people want me to talk about Chelsea defenders in general on this video. Some of the questions that came in, they're more like game week preview questions, so we will cover them on Thursday. But I selected Rudiger because he's the most transferred out Chelsea defender out of the main 3 that people own, right, which are Rudiger, James and Alonso. So 29,000 transfers out. Is it a good time to get rid? Now, again, I've been talking about this for a few weeks now, right? And you kind of get a bit like tunnel vision where you can constantly think about the blanks and stuff, and it almost feels like you've got to get rid of players sooner than you do. Liverpool at home, Man City away, Spurs at home, right? That's not a good fixture run. Those teams are all going to make it tough. I mean, Chelsea is such a good defence, and we should remember that hopefully, as long as they stay fit and available, Kante and Kovacic should be back for Chelsea. That is going to make such a big difference for Chelsea that there's every chance that for Liverpool, Man City, Spurs, they could keep 1 out of 3 clean sheets, maybe 2 if they play really, really well. So it's not like we have to rush out to get them. Like if you got to that Liverpool game and you had 2 Chelsea defenders, even if you just got rid of one and played the other one like Reece James or someone like that, it's not the end of the world, right? I'm not saying that you should be bringing them in right now because I just don't think you probably should. And I'm not saying you need to hold them for the Liverpool game. But if for some reason it works out that you need to do that, it's not the end of the world. But ultimately, we need to start thinking about a plan of who to get rid for and when to get rid. Because Liverpool, Man City, Spurs, then a blank, then another blank is not a good fixture run at all. The problem is, I think Villa's a tough game, but I can see Chelsea getting a clean sheet there. And Brighton at home is not a bad fixture at all. Like Lamptey could cause them some problems up against Alonso, possibly. But ultimately, the Brighton attack is not that great. So both the next 2 fixtures are pretty good likelihood of a clean sheet for Chelsea. So I wouldn't rush out to get rid of them. If you are selling them, then not Tsimikas, I would say. I would have maybe said Robertson if he hadn't gone and got himself suspended, because I do think he looks good right now. Trent's still the number 1, but Robertson's not a bad pick either if you got the cash. Otherwise, you've got to go to Man City. Cancelo and Diaz are the top picks. Maybe Laporte, but he's only like 0.6 million cheaper than Diaz. I think Diaz will get enough games extra, even if it's just like 1, maybe 2 over the next 10 weeks to make it worthwhile. Otherwise, you're probably going cheaper. Players like Dalot, Ben Davies, maybe players like that, Reguilon, and just hope that he comes back in the next game. And this is the problem. I don't think right now we can be absolutely certain of who to go for. Like West Ham defender, possibly if they're available, but there's just no like definites you want to go for. So if you can keep them for Villa away and Brighton at home, I definitely would do that. But also have a plan when you're going to get rid of them, and preferably who for. Even if you're not quite sure, at least narrow it down. I'd probably be looking at getting in Spurs defender because they've got like 3 extra games to play and pretty good fixtures. And also Man United because they've got a couple of extra games to play and pretty good fixtures as well. So someone like Dalot, who I expect to be hopefully first choice going forward for Man United, will probably be where I'd be looking. But right now, there's not really any need to be getting rid of your Chelsea defenders, especially with Kovacic and Kante hopefully back and able to play a bit more, because that will really help out their defence. Dennis is an interesting one because I feel like there was all that talk about King versus Dennis the last game they played, but then because they've had 2 games off now, 2 games postponed, we've kind of forgotten about them. They haven't really been talked about much, obviously because you can't bring them in. We don't know if the game against Wolves away is definitely going ahead, but we would hope that it would, right? The Premier League, again, is planning to play all the fixtures, and so far none of the Boxing Day fixtures are called off. And he has had nearly 70,000 transfers in. The only thing I would say is, I mean, if you're paying around the £6 million mark and you don't want to go for Pookie, which is fair enough, there aren't really too many strikers to choose from. So I think if you're trying to get money to make another move in defence or midfield, or even up front, maybe you're trying to get the funds to get Ronaldo back or Kane or someone like that, then fair enough. There probably isn't too many options. So I don't think he's necessarily a bad buy. But if you're getting someone in because you need to play them, then Wolves away, West Ham at home, Spurs at home is not that great. They could wait until Newcastle away or Norwich home until you bring them in. Again, they might be one of the teams that gets a double game week. We'll have to wait and see exactly what happens there. And if that's the case, they probably are good squad players still and good long-term holds. And look, I've got Josh King, so I'm not worried about having a Watford attacker. I'm not looking to get rid of him anytime soon. But you should, in my opinion, you should only be bringing him in this week if you are looking to fund another move. Otherwise, I just wouldn't really want to bring someone in before Wolves away. Like, I think Antonio has still got pretty good fixtures as long as their games go ahead. Lacazette maybe, although that is probably a little bit short term. There are other options there. Calvert-Lewin might be back this week, and if he gets some minutes, he might be good from kind of game week 20 onwards. So, yeah, look, nothing wrong with Dennis. Good squad player. There is still the chance he goes to African Cup of Nations. It is worth pointing that out. I tried to find like the latest news. Like, it's weird because it's not too long till it happens. But it seems like there's not too much information about squads. So I think I saw an article, I think it was goal.com, with a predicted provisional squad that Dennis was going to be in. But it was just predicted. Right? None of it's confirmed yet, so we just don't know. But Nigeria do have a new boss. So I don't know what was going on before, but Dennis said at the start of, I think it was December, that if he did get called up, he didn't rule out taking the opportunity up, right, and going with the squad. So we just don't know. I'm not trying to put people off, but it is a possibility, right? Josh King still on penalties, etc. We think could be a slightly better option. He's also 0.2 million cheaper now. It's worth pointing that out. Before, when the discussions were happening, Josh King was more expensive, but he's now cheaper. So I know that Dennis played through the middle last game. Nothing to say that Josh King doesn't do that this time. It's hard to say. Dennis's underlying numbers, to be honest, 0.43 expected goal involvement per 90 is not that bad for a £6 million forward. So I'm certainly not sitting here saying he's a bad option. But if you can get away with not buying him this week, trying to give yourself a little bit more time to see what happens with African Cup of Nations, that might be the right play. So there you go. Let me know what you think about the players on this list. Should we be buying them? Should we be avoiding them? Like, what would you do with Smith Rowe? He's one of the hardest ones on this list, I think. Norwich away, you've probably got to keep him, but there has to be the expectation that he doesn't start again. Bernardo Silva, is he really playing deeper? Is he now a bad option, or is he just really the same as before? Just because he was scoring so many points, they've just dried up a little bit because he was never going to keep it up anyway, right? So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. I will be back tomorrow with team selection. Then we'll have game week preview, and then I'll decide how many more videos we're doing before the Boxing Day deadline stream. So thank you for watching. Hit that like button, hit subscribe, and I'll see you again soon.